Good evening, and thank you for tuning in once again. Tonight's letter comes from Mr. John Miller, a 64-year-old listener from a quiet small town here in the U.S. It's a story of an ordinary couple, yet one filled with laughter, tears, and above all, enduring love. Let's listen together.
My name is John Miller. I'm 64 years old, and I've been married to my wife for almost 40 years. Lately, she's been fussing at me more than usual. John, why is your hearing getting so bad?
John, why do you keep forgetting things these days? The truth is, I was recently diagnosed with the early stages of mild dementia. It isn't severe, but ever since then, my wife has become extra attentive. I couldn't help but feel uneasy. More than once a day, I wondered, am I becoming a burden?
One day, we got into an argument. She wanted me to keep a daily journal, just like the doctor recommended, but I refused, stubbornly. I'm fine. Why should I write everything down? You're treating me like I'm already a patient. She grew quiet. Then, with tears in her voice, she said, John, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of you changing. What terrifies me most is the thought that one day you might forget me.
I had no words. My pride kept me silent, but deep down, her words shook me. A few days later, she surprised me. Instead of a fancy anniversary dinner, she took me to the park. On a bench, she set down a small cake and handed me an old photo album. Wedding pictures, our daughter's first birthday, family trips. Page by page, she showed me our life together. She said softly, John, if your memory ever fades, I'll show you these photos every day, and then you'll remember how precious our journey has been. My eyes filled with tears. I took her hand and whispered, I'm sorry for being so stubborn. Because of you, I still know exactly who I am.
Since that day, I've kept a daily journal. I write down everything, what we had for dinner, our little conversations, even the flowers in our garden. And on the very first page, I wrote, my name is John Miller. My wife is Susan. For 40 years, we have been two halves of one whole. Even if my memory fades someday, I'll read these pages and remember. And I'll hold on to the moments we've laughed and loved together forever. That was tonight's story from Mr. John Miller. It reminds us that while memory may grow dim, love never truly disappears. If you haven't shared a warm word with your loved ones lately, maybe tonight is the perfect time. This has been At the End of Your Day, the warmth of a story. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back next time with another gentle story.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Life often brings us to moments where we must make life-changing decisions. Today's story is about a 57-year-old mother and her daughter who is considering divorce. It's a heartfelt story of honesty, struggle, and the warmth that can be found in love and family. Let's begin.
My name is Mary Thompson, and I'm 57 years old. I've been married for decades, and my only daughter, Emily, is 33. She's been married for 5 years. One evening, Emily called me. Her voice was heavy and trembling. Mom, I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce.
My heart sank. I know marriage isn't always easy, but hearing my daughter say those words took the breath out of me. I tried to stay calm and asked, why do you feel that way? Did something happen? She was silent for a long moment, then whispered through tears, Mom, I just feel so lonely. Even when my husband is right next to me, I feel like I'm completely alone.
Her words brought me back to my own younger years. I remembered the times when I too had felt that same emptiness. A few days later, Emily came over for dinner. She looked so fragile, like a child. She barely touched her food. I asked, "So, are you certain? Do you really want a divorce?" She hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Yes, Mom, I'm exhausted." Inside me, two feelings clashed. One voice said, if she's truly unhappy, maybe I should let her go. The other said, marriage isn't something you just walk away from when it gets tough. Finally, my frustration spilled out. "Emily, do you think marriage is a game? If you quit every time it's hard, what's going to change?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she shouted back, "You don't understand, Mom. I'm not happy at all." That night, we both turned away in silence. For days, I carried the weight of her words. Then, while cleaning the attic, I found something. My old diary from the early years of my marriage. Page after page was filled with my struggles. Another fight today. I want to leave too. But when I see my child's face, I can't give up. Marriage isn't a bed of roses. It's more like a mountain trail with steep climbs and hard descents. Reading those lines, I realized Emily's pain was exactly the same as mine back then. The next day, I called her over and handed her the diary. "Sweetheart, I wrote this when I was your age. You said I couldn't understand, but I do. I really do." Emily's eyes widened as she read. Then tears spilled down her face as she leaned into my arms. "Mom, so you felt that way too. I thought it was just me." That day, we talked longer and deeper than we had in years. A few days later, Emily told, "Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today's story is about a 68-year-old grandmother who decides to look for a new job. Why would she do that at her age? What challenges did she face, and how did her very first day at work turn out?" It's a story full of warmth, struggle, and inspiration. Let's dive right in. My name is Margaret Davis, and I'm 68 years old. My husband passed away a few years ago, and my children all have families of their own now. That leaves me living alone in a small house in the suburbs of Ohio. Most mornings, I'd wake up, make coffee, and sit by the window. The sunlight was warm, but my heart often felt empty. Hours would slip away in front of the television, and I'd ask myself, is this really how I want to spend the rest of my life?
One afternoon, my 8-year-old grandson asked me, "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to do something amazing. What do you want to do?" That question struck me hard. I realized I still had time, energy, and desire to do something meaningful. So I decided I'm going to find a job again, not for money, but to prove to myself and to my grandson that age is just a number.
But finding work at 68 wasn't easy. Most job listings said things like energetic, under 60 preferred, or fast-paced environment.
It felt like the world was telling me, "You're too old." At one interview for a cashier position at a local grocery store, the young manager looked at me with polite hesitation. "Ma'am, this job requires quick hands and a lot of standing. Are you sure you can handle that?" The words stung. For a second, I wanted to leave, but something inside me spoke louder. "Don't give up. Show them what you're made of." I lifted my chin and said, "I may not be the fastest, but I'm dependable. I'll show up, work hard, and never quit. Give me a chance, and you won't regret it." The manager's expression softened, though he didn't promise anything that day. A week later, the phone rang. "Mrs. Davis, we'd like you to start with us next Monday. Are you available?" Tears filled my eyes. It wasn't just about the paycheck. It was the feeling of being needed again. On my first day, I put on a neat blouse and slacks, stood in front of the mirror, and whispered to myself, "Margaret, you can do this. Today is the start of something new." At the store, the younger employees greeted me warmly. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. D. We're glad to have you." The register system was confusing at first, and I stumbled a few times when bagging groceries, but a kind coworker guided me patiently, and even the customer smiled. "Take your time, honey," one woman said. "We're in no rush." Those small gestures melted away my nerves. When my shift ended, I walked home with tired feet, but a heart full of joy. I sat on a park bench, looked up at the evening sky, and thought, "I did it. I'm back in the world again. My story isn't over." That evening, I called my grandson. "Sweetheart, Grandma has a new job now. Isn't that exciting?" Through the phone, I heard his bright laugh. "Wow, Grandma, you're awesome." And that was the greatest reward of all. That night, I fell asleep peacefully, eager for the next morning to arrive. Who would have thought at 68 I'd be excited about going to work again? So, what did you think of today's story? The journey of a 68-year-old grandmother starting a new job reminds us it's never too late for a fresh start. Persistence and honesty always shine through, and even small steps can bring great joy. If you've been hesitating to try something new, maybe today's story will give you the courage to begin. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next time with another warm and inspiring story. Sometimes in life, there are moments that quietly wrap around our hearts with warmth. Today's story is about a 63-year-old man and a swing in his neighborhood park. It was once a place of joy with his wife, but after she passed away, he stayed away for a long time. Then one day, he sat on that swing again, and what happened next was something he never expected. Let's step into the story. My name is John Miller, and I'm 63 years old. For more than 30 years, my wife and I lived in the same neighborhood. We never lived the flashy life. We didn't travel the world or dine at expensive restaurants, but we had our little ritual that meant everything to us. After dinner and dishes, my wife would say with a smile, "John, the air feels nice tonight. Let's go to the park swing." And I would always joke, "Back to our squeaky chairs again, huh?" So we'd walk to the small park down the street, sit side by side on the old swings, and talk about our day.
Did I put too much salt in dinner tonight? Maybe a little, but it was perfect because you were across the table. Simple jokes, small worries, a gentle way to end the day. The creaking swing was like background music for our little world. But one afternoon, she suddenly collapsed at home. We rushed to the hospital. The doctor's face said it all. "Prepare yourselves," he whispered. My wife, pale but still with that warm look in her eyes, reached for my hand. "John, I'm sorry. I think I have to go first. Please, even if you're alone, live strong." That was the last thing she ever said to me. When the warmth left her hand, it felt like the world went dark. After the funeral, the house felt unbearable. An empty chair across the dinner table, a pillow untouched in our bedroom, fewer dishes in the sink. And the park swing? I couldn't even step near it. From a distance, I would see it swaying in the wind, and I could almost hear her laughter. I would turn away quickly, tears blurring my sight. Maybe it'd be easier if it just broke down and disappeared. Seeing it still standing there, exactly the same, was painful. Months passed, but the emptiness stayed. One evening, I stood by the window, looking at the park. Kids were laughing and running. Mothers were sitting on benches, chatting. It all looked peaceful, but to me, it only deepened the silence. Something in me moved. I walked to the park, and for the first time in months, I sat on that swing, her swing. The chains creaked as I gently rocked back and forth. I closed my eyes, and her voice filled my ears. "John, doesn't the air feel good tonight?" The memory was so vivid, I almost replied. Instead, tears rolled down my cheeks. "Mary, why does the world feel so unbearably empty without you?" The swing swayed, and I felt like I was falling into a bottomless pit. The only sounds left were the creak of the chains and my quiet sobs. I thought nobody noticed me, but then I heard a gentle voice. "Sir, are you okay?" Startled, I looked up. A young mom stood there, smiling kindly. "Please come out here more often. We'd love to see you. Next time, let us bring you a cup of coffee." I was stunned. I nodded, unable to find the words. Then another mom added softly, "We used to see you with your wife on these swings. You two always look so sweet together." Tears filled my eyes again. I thought no one had noticed, but they had, all along. Since that night, I have returned to the park now and then. The laughter of children and the voices of neighbors became comfort, not pain. "Mr. Miller, how are you today? Tell us more about your wife. She sounds wonderful." At first, it was hard to talk about her, but soon I found myself smiling. She loved flowers. She'd plant little pots in the corner of our yard. And her soup, always a little salty, but it was the best thing I've ever tasted. As I spoke, I felt her close again. I realized, though I lost my wife, I wasn't truly alone. The empty swing beside me was now filled with the warmth of neighbors' kindness. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, I whispered, "Mary, the world is still kind." And yes, I still swing every day.
A breeze stirred, and the swing moved gently, as if she were sitting beside me once more. And in that moment, I knew. Even when love is gone from this world, its memory and warmth never leave us. So, how did you feel about today's story? The story of a 63-year-old man and the swing in his neighborhood park reminds us, even when our loved ones leave, their memories remain. Comfort sometimes comes from the most unexpected people. And even in loneliness, small kindnesses can light the way. If you know someone who might feel alone, remember that a simple smile or kind word can mean more than you realize. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next time with another warm and uplifting story.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Sometimes in life, we are forced to face a truth we never imagined. For someone who has spent a lifetime with a partner, discovering betrayal can feel like the ground disappearing beneath your feet. But today's story is not only about betrayal, it's about courage, dignity, and the choice to begin again. This is the story of a grandmother who, after discovering her husband's affair, chose not to be afraid, but to step forward into a new chapter of her life.
I am a woman in my 70s. I spent more than 50 years with my husband. We married young, built a family together, and survived hardships side by side. I always believed we would be each other's last companion. But one day, I found a small crack in that belief. It started with a receipt in his jacket pocket, flowers, and an expensive restaurant. The date was the same day I was in the hospital. My heart sank. At that time, who was he with? At first, I told myself I must be overthinking. But once suspicion began, I couldn't unsee the small things. Late nights, shirts carrying an unfamiliar scent, and the way he guarded his phone. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together, and denial was no longer possible.
Finally, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I placed the phone with the message in front of him and asked quietly, "Tell me the truth. What is this?" His face drained of color. He lowered his head and muttered, "I'm sorry. I was foolish, but I never planned to leave home. This family was still my priority." Tears filled my eyes, a strange mix of pain and relief. Was that supposed to make it better? That he betrayed me, but not completely? It was then I realized I had a choice.
I stood before the mirror often in those days. The wrinkles on my face told a long story, but my eyes still held strength. And my heart whispered, "You've endured enough. Now it's time to live for yourself." So I said to him, "This is the end. We're done." He looked at me in shock. "Divorce? At our age? What will people think? What about the children?" I answered calmly, "People's opinions don't matter. I have been alone for a long time already. The only difference now is I will finally be alone on my own terms." When I told my children, they were surprised. "Mom, are you sure? Won't you be lonely?" I smiled and said, "I've been lonely for years, but now I will be free." The divorce process wasn't easy, but with each passing day, the weight on my shoulders grew lighter. I began tending a small garden in the mornings, taking painting classes at the community center, and traveling with friends I hadn't seen in years. And most importantly, I rediscovered myself. Some people still ask, How can you start over at your age? And I tell them, starting over has nothing to do with age. It only takes courage. Now, when I look in the mirror, I smile and whisper, "Well done. At last, you're living as yourself." So, how did today's story touch you? This grandmother faced the deepest wound a marriage can bring, betrayal. But instead of surrendering to fear, she chose courage. She chose to honor her dignity, to live the rest of her days not in silence, but in freedom. We often say, age is just a number. Today's story reminds us, it's true. Courage doesn't belong to the young. Courage belongs to anyone who refuses to let fear decide their life. If you are holding back, staying quiet only for the sake of others, perhaps today is the day you choose yourself. Thank you for listening.
Hello, I'm a stay-at-home mom in my early 40s, and today's story is heavy. I don't really have a safe place to say this out loud, so I'm writing it here. My husband and I have been married for 15 years. I thought we were an ordinary, steady family. He worked hard at his company, I ran the household and raised our 2 kids. Sure, we had small arguments, but like most couples, they came and went. A few months ago, something I still can't wrap my head around happened. My husband quit his job without telling me. That evening, right around his usual commute time, he walked in, set his keys down, and said, "I quit today." I thought he was joking, but his face was serious, and he'd already turned in his resignation letter. I was so stunned I couldn't speak. Why would you quit without talking to me? What about the mortgage, the kids' activities and tutoring? What's the plan? I was on the edge of tears. He stayed strangely calm. I'm burned out. I just can't do it anymore. I need to rest and figure out what's next. I felt the floor drop. I understand that work can grind you down. I really do. But how do you make a decision that changes your whole family's future alone? This isn't just his life. It's our home, our kids. Why would he decide something this big by himself? Since then, he's been home a lot. At first, I told myself he needed a breather, but as the weeks passed, my anxiety grew. He was planted in front of the TV or scrolling videos on his phone for hours. When I brought up bills, he'd say, "Don't push, I'm thinking, I just need time." Meanwhile, every day feels like triage to me. Credit cards, mortgage, car payment, the kids' after-school costs. My head is full of numbers and due dates. He, on the other hand, seemed oddly detached. If I got upset, he'd snap back, "Why can't you care about how I feel? Do you have any idea how miserable I was?" That line cuts me open. I want to understand him, yet our reality is heavy and immediate. How am I supposed to make peace with a husband who resigned, tied a knot in our family's lifeline, and never even asked me to hold the rope? Lately, we barely talk. If I start a conversation, he retreats to the bedroom and shuts the door. I try to stay composed in front of the kids, but inside I'm raw. At night, dread and anger blur together and keep me awake. I'm standing at a crossroads. Do I push him to go back to work? Do I jump into the workforce myself? Or do I have to rethink the entire marriage? My mind won't stop spinning. What scares me most is that I don't trust him anymore. The choice to upend our future without me, without us, left a deep crack. Is our marriage still sitting on trust, or has the foundation already split? I honestly don't know. Am I being selfish? Should I give him more time and empathy? Or are my fear and anger exactly what anyone would feel in my shoes? I can't sleep again tonight, so I'm writing, hoping the words will steady my hands. Your story is painfully relatable. A spouse quitting a job without any conversation is more than a financial shock. It's a trust and partnership crisis. Your feelings are valid, full stop.
Anxiety, anger, betrayal, these are natural reactions. A family's livelihood is a joint responsibility. Being cut out of the decision creates a wound of exclusion. Questioning the marriage after an event like this is not dramatic, it's proportionate. There's no need to label yourself selfish. 2. Understanding what may be happening for him. A sudden resignation often sits on top of long-standing workplace stress, unresolved conflict or role strain at work, erosion of self-efficacy, feeling ineffective or trapped, burnout and/or depression. In burnout, people make avoidant, unilateral choices. "I can't do this anymore" is a red flag sentence that signals exhaustion and sometimes hopelessness. That said, acting alone on a life-altering decision fractures marital trust. Both truths can coexist.
3. Rebuild a frame for conversation. Right now, your talks spiral or shut down. You need structure so emotions don't hijack the exchange. Choose the setting. No kids present. Pick a calm window, e.g., weekend morning. Phones away. Lead with impact, not accusation. Instead of, "You're selfish," try, "When you resigned without me, I felt scared and shut out. The mortgage and the kids' needs feel overwhelming on my own." Name a shared goal first. Our goal is family stability and our relationship's health. Let's problem solve toward that. Consider writing bullet points beforehand so you can stay on track. 4. Stabilize the finances, set near-term and long-term steps. He may not be able to walk back into the old role, but stability can't wait. Short-term, explore stopgap income, contract, part-time, gig work, temp assignments with a clear timeline. Medium-term, a concrete re-entry plan, resume refresh, 2 to 3 job targets, weekly application quota, networking goals. Household plan, build a survival budget, mortgage, utilities, groceries, kids' essentials, and a nice-to-have list. Freeze non-essential spending for now. Your role. If you consider working, frame it as partnership, not replacing him. Otherwise, resentment will boomerang. Put these in writing with dates and owners. Ambiguity erodes hope. 5. Repair trust with a clear principle. No major solo decisions. Make a new rule you both agree to. Any decision that affects safety, housing, childcare, health, or major finances requires joint consent. You might say, "If you can commit to no more unilateral choices, I can commit to standing with you through this transition." 6. Get professional help, both and. Medical/mental health check. Screen for depression, anxiety, or burnout. Primary care or a psychiatrist can assess and treat. Couples therapy. A neutral space helps you each say the hard things without escalation and align on a plan. Career counseling/coaching. Turns a vague "I'll think" into a structured path with milestones. Therapy is not punishment. It's a tool to reduce reactivity and increase teamwork. 7. Think long game. Turn crisis into clarity. This rupture can become the moment your marriage moves from autopilot to deliberate partnership. Clarify roles, name vulnerabilities, and design a household decision-making model you both trust. Many couples exit a crisis with better communication than they've ever had, if they face it together. Your pain makes sense. The way forward isn't simply go get a job. It's 1. Understand the burnout. 2. Rebuild your conversation frame. 3. Create a written, staged financial plan. 4. Set the joint decision rule. 5. Bring in professional support as needed. Work these steps steadily, and this doesn't have to be a dead end. It can be a difficult beginning to a more honest, resilient marriage. Note, this guidance is educational and not a substitute for individualized care. If safety, self-harm, or domestic violence is a concern, seek immediate local support. I'm nearly 70 now.
For most of my life, I've been what people would call a stoic, or to be blunt, emotionally distant. I grew up poor. For me, survival meant action, not words. I never learned how to be gentle. When I married, I carried that same silence into my family. At the dinner table, I was the type of father who expected food ready without thanks. If my kids laughed too loud, I barked, quiet. To my wife, I rarely offered soft words. Instead of saying thank you, I'd mutter, "The soup's too salty." My children grew up tiptoeing around me, afraid of my moods, and I told myself, that's how fathers are supposed to be. The years passed. My kids grew up and built lives of their own. My son especially became distant. He rarely talked to me beyond the surface, and though I wished things were different, I had no idea how to fix decades of silence. Then, not long ago, my son brought home his girlfriend, his fiancée-to-be, as my wife eagerly whispered. My wife spent days preparing, cooking every dish she knew, cleaning the house until it sparkled. She was glowing with anticipation. "At last," she said, "our son is ready to start his own family." Though I never said it aloud, I too felt a spark of hope. In my heart, I thought, maybe this young woman will bring warmth into our house. Maybe she'll give my son the gentle home life I failed to show him. When they arrived, I studied her carefully. She was polite, neatly dressed, and clearly respectful. She bowed her head slightly as she greeted me, but her voice was faint, her eyes darting away from mine. Trying to ease the awkwardness, I asked, "So, what do you do?" She hesitated. I work for a tech company." Short, barely above a whisper. I pressed, "What kind of work?" She glanced at my son, then muttered, "IT stuff," and fell silent again. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I wanted her to smile, to laugh a little, to show some spark. Instead, her answer stayed clipped, her posture stiff. At dinner, the distance grew heavier. My wife fussed, urging her to eat more, piling food onto her plate. "Have some more beef, dear." The young woman murmured, "Thank you," but hardly touched her plate. My son sat tense, clearly sensing the atmosphere. As I chewed in silence, I felt an ache in my chest. I had pictured a lively, warm presence, but instead, what I felt was a wall. Cold, reserved, and inside me rose a sting of disappointment. After they left, my wife sighed. "She seems nice, but so quiet. Maybe that's just how young people are these days." But I snapped back, my frustration spilling over. "She's not warm. A daughter-in-law should bring some life into the house. First impressions matter." Even as I said it, the words burned. I realized my disappointment wasn't just about her. It was about me. About the years I'd failed to be warm. About the parts of me I secretly wished could be softened by someone else's presence. Now I sit alone, replaying that dinner. The image of her downcast eyes haunts me. My heart feels heavy, torn between frustration at her silence and guilt for my own. I don't know what to do. Should I confront my son? Should I swallow my feelings and give her more time? Or is this my own shadow, the reflection of my unspoken regrets, staring back at me through her quiet demeanor? I find myself asking, if I had been warmer, would she have felt safer opening up? If I had been a different kind of father, would this meeting have gone differently? And the heaviest thought of all, maybe the real wall wasn't hers. Maybe it was mine, built stone by stone over 70 years of silence. As a family therapist, I often hear stories like this. Stories where disappointment with an in-law or a partner reveals deeper, long-buried wounds in the parent themselves. 1.
Your disappointment is valid. You hoped for warmth. You expected to feel welcomed by the young woman who might become your daughter-in-law. Instead, you felt shut out. That hurt is real. It's not petty, it's human. 2. First impressions can be misleading. Many young adults are nervous meeting a partner's parents. Some become stiff, overly polite, or reserved. This doesn't mean they lack warmth. It may mean they're anxious, cautious, or unsure how to connect across generations. What you read as cold may simply have been fear. 3. Your history colors the moment. You yourself noted that you lived a life of emotional distance. When you say she was not warm, you may also be seeing your own past reflected back. In therapy, we call this projection. Your disappointment with her is tangled with regret about your own silence toward your wife and children. 4. Small gestures can change everything. You don't need to transform overnight into a different man, but you can take small, intentional steps. Greet her with a clear, steady, "I'm glad you came." Offer a short comment of appreciation. "This food is better because you're here." If words are hard, even a smile or nod at the right moment communicates welcome. These signals lower the wall. They show her she is safe to be herself. 5. Share hopes, not complaints, with your son. If you tell your son bluntly, "She's not warm enough," he'll feel torn and defensive. Instead, frame it as hope. "I'd like to know her better next time. Help me understand how to connect with her." That shifts the energy from criticism to invitation.
6. Let your wife lead and support quietly. If your wife is naturally warmer, let her guide the interaction while you offer background support. This way, your future daughter-in-law feels cared for without pressure. 7. Think long-term. Relationships don't bloom overnight. What feels like distance today may soften over time. Remember, you're not just welcoming a daughter-in-law, you're shaping how future generations, including grandchildren, see family. A little patience and warmth now may ripple for decades. I spent my life working hard and raising my kids. Now, in retirement, I thought I'd enjoy nothing more than spending time with my grandchildren. But lately, I've been carrying a secret I haven't shared with anyone, not even with my wife. The truth is, I don't find my granddaughter pretty, and that fact makes me feel like a terrible person. My son has always been my pride and joy. He was bright, well-behaved, and even as a boy, he was handsome enough that neighbors would say, "What a good-looking kid you've got." I used to feel so proud inside. He's my blood. He carries my name so well. So, when he got married, I naturally expected his child to take after him, maybe a little boy or girl with his looks and charm. But when my son and his wife had a daughter, she looked nothing like him. She was the spitting image of my daughter-in-law. Now, let me be clear. My daughter-in-law is not a bad person. She takes good care of the household and she loves my son deeply. But if I'm honest, I never thought she was especially pretty. And to see my granddaughter look exactly like her, it unsettled me. At her first birthday party, relatives all laughed and said, "She looks just like her mom." Everyone called her beautiful. But I couldn't stop thinking, why didn't she inherit her dad's looks? Why couldn't she have my son's bright face? As my granddaughter grew, those feelings only deepened. At 2, at 3, every year she looked more and more like her mother. Her eyes, her smile, even the way she frowned. Every time she laughed, it was like watching my daughter-in-law as a child. And I hated myself for feeling this way. Instead of seeing her simply as a sweet little girl, I kept seeing her as an extension of her mother. That made me pull back. I stopped meeting her gaze. When she came running to me shouting, "Grandpa," I'd scoop her up and smile on the outside, but inside I thought, she looks so much like her mom. My wife, meanwhile, adores her. She says, our granddaughter is the prettiest thing in the world. She showers her with kisses, buys her clothes, takes endless photos. Watching my wife's pure joy only makes me feel guiltier. One day, she said to me, why are you so distant with her? Show her more affection. I couldn't answer. How could I admit my ugly secret? My daughter-in-law, I think, has noticed. Sometimes I catch her giving me a hurt look. After all, she sees how much her little girl loves me and how lukewarm I seem in return. And lately, I'm terrified. What if my granddaughter grows up remembering that her grandpa never thought she was beautiful? What if she feels unloved because of me? At night, I fight inside myself. One voice says, looks don't matter, just love her as she is. But another whispers, why doesn't she look like my son? Why only her mother? And in those moments, I feel like the worst kind of coward. My granddaughter has done nothing wrong. She deserves unconditional love. Yet I let my bias against her mother cloud my heart. So, tonight, I confess what I cannot tell my family. I don't find my granddaughter pretty, and that truth makes me feel like a sinner.
This story is heavy, but not uncommon. Many grandparents wrestle with similar feelings, though few ever say them out loud. 1. A parent's bias is generational. In older generations, who a child takes after was a big deal. Resembling the father's side was considered a point of pride. But that perspective is cultural baggage, not truth. A child's worth has nothing to do with looks. 2. A child is her own person. Your granddaughter isn't just your son's child or your daughter-in-law's copy. She is her own person. What matters is not her features, but her heart, her laughter, her spirit. 3. Love is what she remembers. When your granddaughter runs to you, she isn't looking for approval of her looks. She's seeking love. The memory she carries won't be about appearance. It will be about whether grandpa's arms were open and warm. 4. Accept your feelings, but change your actions. It's okay to admit you struggle inside, but don't let those feelings dictate your behavior. Smile at her, hug her, act in love, even if your emotions are slow to follow. Over time, your heart will change too. 5. Separate daughter-in-law from granddaughter. At the root, your feelings aren't really about your granddaughter. They're about your unresolved expectations of your son and judgments of your daughter-in-law. Untangling those emotions will help you see your granddaughter clearly, as just herself. Light. In short, a child's beauty is not measured by resemblance. Your granddaughter deserves unconditional love simply for being who she is. Let your actions of love lead the way, even when your heart hesitates. Because what she will remember for a lifetime is not whether you thought she was pretty, but whether you made her feel loved.
I am 63 years old, and my husband is 65. We have been married for over 30 years. To the outside world, we look like a peaceful, long-married couple. People often say, "You two seem so happy together, even without children." From the outside, it may appear true, but inside, there are unspoken wounds and an emptiness that has quietly built up over the years. In the early years of our marriage, we didn't worry much about children. "Let's enjoy our time together for a while," we would say, laughing. My husband was busy climbing the corporate ladder, while I ran a small hair salon.
We spent weekends going to the movies or having picnics at the park. We were content, believing that just being together was enough. But as the years went by, the questions started coming. After 5 years of marriage without children, relatives and neighbors began to ask, "So, when are you going to have a baby?" At first, we laughed it off, but when the questions came again and again, they began to weigh on us.
We visited doctors, went through tests, and were told, "There's no serious problem. It's just a matter of timing." We tried medications, adjusted schedules, and hoped for success. Each month ended in disappointment. After years of trying, we slowly let go. My husband tried to stay calm for my sake. "It's okay, we'll be fine, just the two of us. Happiness doesn't have to depend on having children." His words comforted me, but they also pierced my heart. Was it really okay? Did he secretly feel regret? Family pressure made it worse. My mother told me, "Your poor husband, it's such a shame." My in-laws sighed openly, saying, "What happens when the family line ends?" Holidays became unbearable. Sitting at the table, I felt myself shrinking. Eventually, we stopped going to family gatherings or left quickly after a brief visit. Around that time, my husband cautiously brought up adoption. What if we adopted? Maybe happiness isn't just about blood. Maybe we could raise a child and share our lives. I was stunned. A part of me was grateful. He truly wanted to be a father. But fear filled me too. Could I really love an adopted child as my own? What if that child grew up resenting us for not being their birth parents? A few days later, I admitted, "Adoption sounds good, but I'm scared. What if I can't be a real mother to that child?" He sighed, "I'm scared too, but the thought of us just growing old, the two of us, feels overwhelming." We even visited an orphanage once. Small hands tugged at my clothes. Their eyes were so full of longing that tears streamed down my face. Yet, in that same moment, my chest tightened with fear. If I take one of these children home, my life will change forever. Am I ready? My husband's face showed the same hesitation. In the end, we never submitted the adoption papers. I still wonder if that was a mistake. Were we lacking courage? Or was it simply the right choice for us at the time? If we had adopted, would our lives look completely different today? I will never know. The years passed quickly, 10, 20, and now 30. Our home is still just the two of us. We have become each other's shadow. When I open my eyes in the morning, he is there. When I turn off the lights at night, he is by my side. We have learned to let go of relatives' comments, but the emptiness inside has never fully disappeared. Friends talk about their children and show off pictures of grandchildren. I smile politely, but at home,
I sometimes cry in silence. Once, I asked my husband, would it have been nice to have grandchildren too? He paused before answering, we're fine as we are, as long as I have you. Now we are retired. Most of our days are spent together. Morning coffee, grocery shopping, evening walks. From the outside, our life looks calm. But inside, sometimes it feels suffocating. Why is there so little to talk about? If we had adopted, would things feel different now?
One evening, a silly fight over TV channels erupted. In frustration, I burst into tears. It's just the two of us, every day the same. Thinking of living like this until we die makes me feel like I can't breathe. My husband said nothing, just lit a cigarette. His back looked unbearably lonely. The future scares me. What happens when we grow old and frail? Who will take care of us? When the subject of nursing homes comes up, my husband jokes, we'll share a room together. I laugh along, but tears prick my eyes. 30 years later, we have neither children nor adopted ones. The emptiness lingers. But what keeps us going is this: we still have each other. We are not perfect, but we are companions and partners. Our road may be incomplete, but it is ours, and that, perhaps, has been enough to carry us this far. This couple's story is not just about not having children. It's about how two people redefine the meaning of marriage, identity, and purpose after 30 years together. Staying side by side for that long is already a major achievement. Yet the feelings of emptiness and anxiety they describe are very real. Here are some key perspectives. 1. Acknowledge the weight of your emotions. The loneliness, fear, and frustration you feel are not selfish. They are natural responses to the reality of living without children in a culture that often measures families by lineage. For years, you reassured each other with phrases like, "We'll be fine, just the two of us." But suppressed emptiness doesn't disappear. It surfaces eventually. Naming your feelings is the first step toward healing. 2. The meaning of considering adoption. The fact that you seriously thought about adoption and even visited an orphanage already shows courage and responsibility. The decision not to adopt doesn't mean you failed. It means you were honest about your limits and fears. Adoption is not just an act of generosity. It requires lifelong readiness. Recognizing that you weren't ready may have been the most respectful choice you could make for yourselves and for a child. 3. Rebuilding communication. The bigger challenge now is not the absence of children, but the shrinking space for conversation. Long-married couples often assume, "I don't need to say it, they already know." But when there are no children to fill the silence, the lack of communication becomes more noticeable. Try setting aside regular times to share feelings, even something as simple as, "What was hard for you this week? And what are you grateful for?" This small practice can restore connection.
4. Addressing practical fears. Concerns about old age, healthcare, and caregiving are very real. Instead of letting those worries grow in silence, turn them into concrete plans. Review finances together. Research long-term care options. And create a support network of friends, neighbors, or community services. Preparation itself can provide tremendous peace of mind. 5. Expanding your social world. Without children, the risk of social isolation is greater. That's why intentional connection is essential. Volunteer work, community activities, faith groups, or hobby circles can provide not only companionship, but also renewed meaning in life. Shared experiences outside the home can give couples fresh energy and conversation topics. 6. Consider professional support. If the burden of unspoken feelings becomes too heavy, couples counseling or individual therapy can be transformative. A neutral third party can help you untangle years of suppressed emotion and teach you new ways of communicating. In summary, you already have a strong bond. 30 years of shared life proves it. The challenge now is to confront the emptiness honestly, reopen communication, prepare realistically for the future, and reach beyond the two of you to build new connections. By doing so, the next chapter of your marriage can carry not only stability, but also renewed purpose and warmth.
I am in my early 60s, and a few days ago, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. When the doctor said the word cancer, my heart sank. My ears rang with that single word. But strangely, I didn't cry right away. The shock was real, but what I felt even more strongly was a strange emptiness. Because the man sitting next to me, the man now facing cancer, is the same man who made my life so difficult for decades. We married in our 20s. He was the eldest son in a traditional family, and from the very beginning, he carried himself like the head of the clan. At first, I thought his sense of responsibility was admirable, but in marriage, it turned into rigid patriarchy and arrogance.
He poured himself into supporting his parents and younger siblings.
If a brother needed money, he gave it.
Holidays were spent showering his parents with gifts,
Yet, with me and our children, he was cold and stingy. When our kids needed new shoes, he told them to make do with the old ones. When I asked for more money for groceries, he accused me of being wasteful. At home, he was emotionally absent. If the children won an award, he brushed it off. If I complained of exhaustion, he said, "That's your job." I longed for a kind word, a gentle touch, but it never came.
Ironically, the siblings and parents he sacrificed so much for never truly appreciated him. They treated his efforts as natural, even expected. Watching that made me both angry and sad. When I confronted him, asking why he cared more for them than his own family, he dismissed me. "You don't understand. As the eldest son, it's my duty." In middle age, things grew worse. He began drinking heavily. He came home drunk, shouting, frightening the kids. I lived in fear each time I heard his key in the lock at night. Sometimes he would lash out, insisting, "You owe everything to me. Without me, you'd have nothing." And I would reply coldly, "Yes, I survived because of you, but I also suffocated because of you. The children eventually left home, and I thought life might calm down. But even then, he never changed. He was still cold, still more concerned with his siblings than with me. And I, with no parents of my own to lean on, felt more alone than ever. Then came the cancer diagnosis. Sitting beside him in the doctor's office, I felt a storm of emotions. Anger, bitterness, but also, strangely, pity. Part of me thought, after all the pain you caused, why should I take care of you now? Another part whispered, but we've spent our whole lives together. Can I really walk away?
Even after the diagnosis, he clung to his pride. I'll beat this. I'm the eldest son. I can't lose. Hearing that, I could only shake my head. Even at death's door, he was still trapped in that role. Now I am standing at a crossroads. Do I stay and become his caretaker, sacrificing what little freedom I might have left? Or do I finally choose myself, after a lifetime of being ignored and dismissed? I don't know the answer yet.
This story is not just about a cancer diagnosis. It's about the heavy legacy of a long marriage shaped by patriarchy, neglect, and alcohol abuse. The wife's feelings of anger, emptiness, and even guilt are all understandable. Validate your feelings. It is natural to feel conflicted. Part of you wants to walk away, part of you feels pity. Neither makes you selfish. These emotions reflect the complexity of decades of hardship. Caregiving is not an automatic duty. Spousal caregiving is often assumed, but it is not an obligation carved in stone. You have choices. Medical services, hospice care, and community resources exist so that caregiving does not have to rest entirely on one person's shoulders.
3. Healing old wounds takes more than illness. A diagnosis does not erase years of emotional neglect or abuse. Forgiveness cannot be forced. If he truly wants reconciliation, it will require effort on his part. Illness alone is not enough. 4. Prioritize your own well-being. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If caring for him destroys your physical or mental health, then no one benefits. Consider therapy, support groups, or confiding in trusted friends to help you navigate this period. 5. Involve your adult children. Even if their relationship with their father was strained, sharing the reality of his illness with them and your own struggles may bring unexpected support.
6. Remember, it's a choice, not a commandment. Ultimately, deciding whether and how much to care for him is your decision. It is not unloving to place boundaries. It is not betrayal to choose your own health. In summary, you have already carried a heavy burden for decades. His illness doesn't erase that history, but it does give you an opportunity to decide, consciously and freely, how you want to live the next chapter of your life. Whatever choice you make, let it be one that protects your dignity, your health, and your future.